Alien Isolation. So before I get into the actual retrospective part of this video, I wanted to do something a little bit different with this video and discuss what actually happened with this game, because this is a very unique case. This game essentially flopped. There's plenty of reasons why it flopped, and it's pretty obvious for anyone who has a brain who's played the game from start to finish. But you have a bunch of fanboys who just lauded this game and praised the hell out of it, and just they don't understand why this game failed, why it didn't succeed in its sales, and why it couldn't retain its audience. And the game scored favorably for the most part. The two standout reviews for this were IGN and GameSpot, and I'm going to talk about those reviews because after I did beat this game, I did go back and rewatch those video reviews, and I agree with them 100% as to what's wrong with this game. This is similar to what happened with Death Stranding, although this game is favored more so than Death Stranding's audience. So yeah, this game, most of the reviews and most of the game's sales came from the PlayStation 4 and the PC. Although the game at the time was released on all platforms, including PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch. It was eventually released on that as well. And a lot of the fans enjoyed this game a lot more than the critics. And I understand why people like this game. I understand why someone would just love this game, and I also understand why someone would just hate this game. For me, I was somewhere in the middle. I think the game is good. I don't think it's great, and I think it makes some very heavy cardinal sins. I think it makes some very sloppy mistakes. Development team that worked on this, being Creative Assembly, they made a lot of mistakes with this game. The biggest one I'm going to discuss in this section of the video. So first of all, to bring up how many people actually supported this game and why it failed. This game sold a little over 2 million copies on console. Most of the sales came from PlayStation 4. And if I scroll down here, this is on GameStat. So as you can see, this blue line is the PlayStation 3 player count. This orange line is the PlayStation 4 player count. Yeah, it's really not that great at all. This is a big budget video game. It's a AAA game with a bunch of grandiose effects, and the character models, even though they're not the best that are out there, they're not cheap. You can tell some money went into this game, some serious money went into it, and clearly it did not recoup that money, even if you add up the sales and everything from all the different platforms that the game was released on. Sega announced that this game was essentially a failure when it comes to sales. And most of the people that supported this game came from Eastern and Southern Europe, countries such as Russia, Hungary, the Czech Republic, United Kingdom, Poland, and then from there it just drops. The United States, which is where the Alien franchise originates from, where the film franchise originates from, the United States did not support this game. The Alien franchise is very popular over in the United States, and so the fact that this game failed to attract the attention of Americans here in the United States, it's a goddamn shame. Very big missed opportunity, which is representative of the game itself. And even on PC, on Steam, less than 10 minutes ago, as I'm recording this video, only a little over 700 players, almost 800, have been playing this game within the past hour. The past 24 hours, a little over 1,200 people, all time 10,000. So those numbers aren't really big at all, because if I search up games like Dark Souls 3, for example, this number would be like 6,000 something, and then these numbers are far larger than that. Clearly, not a lot of people had any sort of investment into this game, but the question remains why. There's been articles that's been written on this game, basically saying that the game's audience didn't even finish it. Most of the game's audience didn't finish it, and when it comes to video games in general, I think this is a weakness of the medium itself because video games are so long and they require a lot of time and patience to sit through. Most people who play video games are casuals, and casuals will quit a video game in a heartbeat the moment a game becomes too frustrating or it becomes too annoying, too stressful. People are going to quit and not come back. At the time of this article, which was written in 2015, only 15% of the people who played Alien Isolation completed the game. This is like estimated to be around 150,000 people, and the game at the time sold over 1 million copies. That is terrible. That's horrible. That means the game flopped. And as it stands right now, trophy that the player earns for just beating the game, it doesn't matter what difficulty level it is, only 17%, almost 18% of the game's audience have even completed the game. So, like I said, this game flopped like crazy, and then it's no better on Xbox either. This was posted 5 months ago. Only 8% of people who played the game on Xbox have finished it. There's been a lot of discussion about that on websites like Reddit. If I pull up IGN's review, the person who reviewed this is Ryan McCaffrey. He's known as like IGN's Xbox guy, so he mainly reviews like the Xbox exclusives and all that on IGN, for IGN, and he gave this game a 5.9. His main issue with this game is the fact that first of all, he felt that the game was too long and the gameplay loop didn't accommodate for such a long length, a long playtime. He also felt that the xenomorph was effective in the first few hours, but then the creature just became annoying the longer the game ran on. And basically everything that Alien Isolation, in his opinion, that's great about the game eventually worked against it, including the atmosphere and the sound design. GameSpot didn't give this game any better of a score than what IGN gave it. They gave it a 6. The person who reviewed this game is Kevin Van Ord, and Kevin Van Ord is known to be like one of the best, or if not the best, reviewer that GameSpot has ever had on their website. I don't believe he works for GameSpot anymore. His opinion was very similar to Ryan McCaffrey's from IGN. Felt that the game was loaded with too much filler, which goes back to how long the game is. He also mentioned that there's too much trial and error in the game and that the save points are too far apart from each other, and that some mechanics are just not consistent. When you take all of this information in, you have to wonder, like, why? Why did this game fail? And then I look up things like the information on the game's hardest difficulty, and even for a hardcore player, I read some of the stipulations they put on the game's hardest challenge, and I just don't understand why they would design something like that, because if any game developer does this and just makes it just forces some of these elements like disabling the HUD, not allowing the player to see how much health or ammo they have, disabling the map, which for me is a big no-no. For me, that's a big detriment for any game if you disable the fucking map. That's actually something that really frustrates me with video games, is not just roaming around aimlessly and not knowing where you're supposed to go. I can't stand that in a video game. When I play a video game, I like to, make progress and feel like my time is being spent proficiently, wisely while I'm playing the game. Disabling the map on a hard difficulty doesn't make much sense. And then other things like removing a mechanic that's extremely important for the player to get through the game successfully, such as the motion tracker not working like it should. It's just these sort of things just makes it obvious why people gave up with this game and why the game didn't retain its audience. I actually looked up information on PSN profiles where people fell off with this game, how much of the game's audience just quit on it past a certain mission. 90% of the game's audience on PlayStation 4 completed the first mission. You have about 70% who completed the second. That dropped down to almost half for the third mission, less than half for the fourth mission, And by the fifth mission, the game has lost more than half of its audience. And then from there, it just continues to drop and drop. And this game has 18 missions. So for the game to lose its audience on by the fifth mission, it's just, again, it goes back to that question, why? And I'm going to answer the question, why, in my retrospective.
Alien Isolation was developed by Creative Assembly and published by Sega. And this is a game that came out 7 years ago, back in 2014. It's a game that I've always wanted to play because I've heard of how good it is. And the concept of the game is something that I found intriguing. I just never got the chance to actually pick the game up, so this is one of the titles that I actually missed. And I made it a priority to make this one of the first games that I had bought when I bought my gaming PC. And so I played this entire game on my laptop, and I recorded the entire playthrough the entire time I was playing. And there were instances when I did pause the game to take a break. There was one point in the game where I just kept dying over and over again. I think I died like 3 or 4 times in the same section, and I had to repeat that entire section. But overall, my playtime rounded out to be just under 18 hours when I add up all of the video footage that I recorded for this. As I said in the beginning of the video, I think Alien Isolation is a good game. As a survival horror game, which is what this game is, it's not really a good survival horror game. It's a decent horror title, but specifically in the subgenre of survival horror, it really isn't that great. And overall, the game overall is lacking severely. This game made 2 very big mistakes. Creative Assembly and the good people over there that developed this game, they made 2 glaring mistakes with this game. The first of which I considered personally to be the game's biggest failure. The second is really the reason why this game failed, why it flopped in sales, why it didn't retain its audience retention, all of that. And so the first of these issues, which was echoed in IGN's review and GameSpot's review of this game, is the length. This fucking game right here is almost 20 hours long. It's between 15 to 20 hours long. Problem with that is that it's a survival horror game. No survival horror game has a gameplay loop that accommodates a damn near 20-hour runtime. Now, one of the main reasons the Resident Evil franchise is as successful as it is and has dominated for the past 20 years and will continue to dominate is the fact that those games are kept at a specific length. Capcom, for almost all of the Resident Evil games, keeps the games anywhere from just a few hours long, just, for speed runs, all the way up to a little over 10 hours. Resident Evil 4 started to change that to where they went for a longer runtime, and then by the time they got to Resident Evil 5 and 6, people really started to criticize the direction that Capcom was going, and then they reverted back to what made the series great with Resident Evil 7, and just kept the newer games at a condensed length. And that's what this game should have done. It should have been anywhere from 10 to 12 hours long at the max, at the most. By the time I got to mission 13, I was just done with this game. I didn't want to play it anymore. I was over the whole gameplay loop of it, the repetitive nature of it as far as the mission objectives go. I was tired of the gimmick with the alien, the xenomorph creature or whatever that stalks you throughout the entire game. I was tired of that, and I just wanted to be done with it. Instead, the game went on for several hours after I was already fatigued, and I just wanted to put the game down and play something else or, whatever I wanted to do with my time. So that's a very big mistake that this game made. The length is just ridiculous with this. It's too long for a survival horror game. Simply, there's no argument or debate to be had about that. It should have been a lot shorter than what it is. And clearly that's a big reason why this game failed. It's one of the reasons why it failed, but it's not the only reason. The second mistake this game made, which is an even bigger mistake and why ultimately I believe it failed, is 2 words. And I just mentioned this series. 2 words. Resident Evil. Resident Evil created survival horror. The day the Resident Evil franchise dies is the day the survival horror genre dies. Resident Evil is survival horror. The only series that's done survival horror as well as Resident Evil is the Dead Space series, and that series wasn't able to retain its quality by the third game, thanks to EA and their bullshit. And Resident Evil is also Capcom's best-selling franchise. It's the reason why they continue to make games in that series, and they don't really go out of their way to try and make any new IP. But why is Resident Evil so successful? Why has Resident Evil dominated the horror genre in video games for the past 2 decades and counting? For one reason and one reason only. The Resident Evil games accommodate both a casual audience and a hardcore audience. They're games that are made for everybody. Anyone can pick up a Resident Evil game and enjoy it. A casual player can enjoy it for the simplicity of, the shooting and everything. A hardcore player can enjoy the games for the complexity of the, ammo consumption and the puzzle design and some of the intricacies of the narrative of the series as a whole. And anyone in between those two audiences, between a casual and a hardcore player, anyone can enjoy a Resident Evil game. That's why that series continues to be strong with its sales and its reception. And Capcom wisely is a company that listens to feedback. They listen to criticism, and that's part of what makes them successful as a company. With this game, the problem is that, for one, it's a horror game, so it's only made for a specific audience in the first place, although I don't consider this to be a reason why the game flopped. It was also released after Aliens Colonial Marines, which was a huge failure. That's one of the biggest failures of all time in the medium of video games. Aliens Colonial Marines was a goddamn disaster. But this game actually sold more than Aliens Colonial Marines. I believe it made double the sales that Colonial Marines did. And so that's not really an excuse either as to why this game failed. The reason this game failed is because it was not made for a casual audience. They abandoned any idea of this being a game for casuals. And that's ultimately what did this game in as far as its sales, and why it failed to meet expectations. So what is it about this game that would turn off a casual player? Well, for one, this is a very stressful game to play. Not necessarily for someone like me, because I'm used to playing, survival horror games like this. But for a casual player that doesn't really play games like this, it would be an instant turnoff. There was not a single second in this game when I was playing it where I just turned off my brain and I just made split-second decisions on the fly. Every single second of this game, every single second of my playthrough, I had to think about what I was doing, where I was going, what weapon I was using, how to complete this puzzle, whatever part I was on, how to proceed in the level. I was constantly thinking the entire runtime. That can get annoying after a specific period of time. It's part of the reason why this game should have been a lot shorter. Sometimes you just want to sit down and play a video game and just enjoy the goddamn game. Turn your brain off and not do a bunch of critical thinking. This game isn't one of those games that you can just sit down, pick up a controller, and just have at it. No, you have to think about what you're doing the entire game. And because of how long the game is, it just got exhausting after a while. And so that's something I'm sure was a huge factor that determined how casual players received this game. And it's probably the reason why most players didn't make it past the 5th level, because they knew what kind of game this was. And by level 3 or level 4, most players, they already said that the game wasn't for them and, made the decision to go ahead and quit. Another big problem with this game is the concept. So the concept of this game is you have the xenomorph from the Alien franchise. One xenomorph basically stalks you throughout pretty much not the entire game, but the majority of the game. It'll drop down in a level and you have to essentially hide because you can't kill it. and the moment it spots you, it's pretty much game over. It's basically instant death, and your defensive options are so weak, pretty much useless, to the point where you have to hide from it. And so when you hide from the xenomorph, it'll search through the level looking for you. You can hear its footsteps. You can hear the sounds and the cries of the creature as it searches for you or for any other living thing in the environment, because it'll also attack human enemies, and I'm going to talk about the other enemy types that they have in this game as well. And once the creature leaves an area, then you can proceed forward to whatever your next objective is. And when it comes back, then you have to basically go back into hiding again. And that's the basic concept of this game. The concept works only for the first few hours. After that, it gets stale because it does not evolve whatsoever beyond that, which is another reason why this game should have been shorter than what it was, because the concept wasn't as fleshed out as it should have been. The problem with the xenomorph creature in this game, the alien, is the fact that you can't really defend yourself against it. Once it spots you, it is game over. And sometimes you'll be in a hiding spot. You could be hiding under a desk. You could be in a locker somewhere or in some kind of cabinet, hiding out. And the damn thing will spot you, kill you, and then force you to replay that section of the game. Which, by the way, that's another big mistake that this game made, is the save system that it has. Like other survival horror games like Dead Space and Resident Evil, this game uses a standard save point system instead of automatic checkpoints that save, which is what the majority of video games do these days, is that they automatically save your progress once you arrive to a checkpoint. This game doesn't do that. You have to use these save points in order to save your progress. But here and there throughout the game, the save points are too far away from each other. Either that, or you have to maneuver around a lot of different enemies without dying in order to get to a save point to save your progress. And if you die before you get to a save point, then you have to replay from your last save point, which could easily take away 20 to 30 minutes of your time, if not more. And this is another reason why I think the game's audience didn't stick around past Mission 5. Going back to the xenomorph creature, the alien, what starts off as effective use of sound and horror-induced imagery and very carefully designed stealth-based gameplay easily evolves into a repeated pattern of frustration and annoyance. This game just, especially with the alien and everything, it just started to get on my nerves and basically test my patience the longer I played this. And I think the same thing happened with Ryan McCaffrey from IGN and Kevin Van Ord from GameSpot. They too, as well as other players who were smart enough to see this game for what it is, they too saw that the gameplay loop wasn't strong enough or varied enough to accommodate for a runtime of damn near 20 hours. But the alien isn't even this game's biggest problem when it comes to how the enemies are designed. The real issue actually comes from the androids and the humans, which are the only other two enemy types in this game, aside from the infamous face huggers from the Alien series, which only show up in scripted sections towards the end of the game. So Creative Assembly obviously knew they couldn't have an entire game where the player is just hiding out from the alien. They had to mix it up, or at least attempt to try and mix it up a little bit. And so they have two more enemy types that are common throughout this game, which are humans and the androids from the Alien series. There's two problems with both of those enemy types. Starting off with the androids, they're essentially damage sponges. They're extremely hard to kill. They take way too much damage, even on standard difficulty, which is the difficulty that I played this game at. And basically, they can back you in a corner, and once you're in a corner, the game is not designed well enough to basically fight them off. And actually, the best way to kill them is with the stun baton. But just like every other weapon in the game, the stun baton has a certain number of uses. It basically has ammunition, and once you run out of ammunition, you can't use it anymore. And ammunition is very scarce in this game. So the androids, for the most part, similar to the xenomorph, because they're so hard to kill and ammo is so scarce in this game, it's actually better to just hide from them and avoid them entirely if at all possible. Then you have the human enemies, and the human enemies were done terribly. The human enemies were actually the worst parts of this game from a combat perspective, because the human enemies magically have like 20/20 vision. They have like super hearing. They can easily detect you even if you're hiding like under a table in the darkness. They can somehow see you. Whereas the xenomorph, it takes a bit more work for the xenomorph to actually spot you, including the androids as well. The humans will spot you instantly, even at a great distance. And they all have 90 to 95 accuracy as far as their aiming, and basically you can die within 3 or 4 hits from the guns, the enemies with the guns in this game. But what really makes the humans annoying is the fact that they're all in packs whenever you encounter them. Usually there's like 3 or 4 in an area and you have to take them all out in order to proceed to your next objective. And as someone who's actually sat and watched all of the Aliens movies, the human enemies doesn't really make much sense if you look at the movies, because usually the humans actually team up together to fight off the aliens because they realize they're all being hunted. Whereas in this game, the humans, they'll team up together, but whenever they face Ripley, whenever they spot her, most of them just turn hostile instantly. That part of the game just pissed me off whenever the human enemies were on screen. They were designed horribly, and really they should have been presented as the player's allies rather than another enemy type that you have to take out. It also doesn't help the fact that one of the game's trophies asks you as the player to beat the game without killing any of the humans. And I just don't see how that's possible even on the easiest difficulty. Essentially, you would have to successfully sneak through the entire game, and that is virtually impossible to do in this, especially when the humans are on screen. So when you're not engaged in combat, your objectives really are nothing but glorified fetch quests, where you're talking to someone on the radio and they ask you to go to a specified part of the ship, the derelict ship that you're on, so you can just do dumb shit that you wonder why they can't go and do it themselves. And they're asking a woman like Ripley to go and do it and put her life in danger to do something really anybody can do. And your objectives are simple. Go here and pull this lever. Go to this part of the ship and pick up this object. Go here and hack this terminal. Oh, that terminal's not working? Fine, take the alternate route. Go all the way around and then activate another console so you can come back, so you can trace your steps all the way back to where you were before so you can activate this terminal. The game is just filled with objectives like this from start to finish, the entire game. And it becomes super repetitive really quickly. When you add in the trial and error gameplay with the stealth sections, be it if you're facing the humans, the androids, or the xenomorph itself, that's when this game just turns into a frustrating slog that you have to sit through for an extended period of time that wears out its welcome long before you reach the final levels of the game. And all of these reasons are why this game failed. All of these reasons are why casual players just abandoned the game early on, and why the game failed to meet sales expectations from Sega. There are ways that they could have made this gameplay loop work. They could have added a few more surprises or maneuvers to deal with the alien. They could have added more defensive options for the player to use. They could have made resources in the environment more plentiful to make the game less frustrating. But see, they don't do any of that, and it really hurts the game in the long run. And because the gameplay loop and the objectives themselves don't really change or vary a great deal throughout the entire game, it really does become frustrating to the point where you just want to put your controller down. To make matters even worse, I could not play this game really at all during the day. I had to play it at night simply because the game is too dark. There's too many areas in the game that are not illuminated very well. I couldn't really see where I was going. They have a flashlight mechanic that's in the game, but it really doesn't provide a great source of light, and then they limit the flashlight by forcing the player to use these batteries. It has a battery mechanic where the batteries will run out, and then you have to refill the flashlight with new batteries. And if you don't have any batteries in your inventory, then you're just stuck playing a pitch black dark ass game where you can't see shit. And I actually went into the menu. I went into the options menu to see, if I could turn up the brightness, only to arrive to the revelation that the fucking development team at Creative Assembly, they either forgot or deliberately didn't include a brightness option in the options menu. You can't actually adjust the game's brightness setting. There is no brightness setting for this game. And I looked in the options menu more than once trying to look for it, and I could not find it. And so it's small things like that that just make the game redundant and just needlessly frustrating. The core gameplay, I think, is good, but they don't do enough with it for it to be fun past the first initial few hours of the game. And so all that you're left with is the story. And the story, I thought, was actually pretty decent. But the problem with the story is that it just feels like a lesser creative version, basically a fan fiction clone of Ridley Scott's original 1979 Alien film. And the story is set 15 years after the events of the original Alien movie, where you play as Amanda Ripley, who is the daughter of Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley from the movies. And you're basically stuck on this ship that belonged to Ellen Ripley, and that's where everything takes place. And it just devolves into a typical story of survival and trying to escape this spaceship, while at the same time purging the alien presence that has gotten aboard the ship. And I compare this game to something like Dead Space, which did the same thing. And Dead Space, the original Dead Space, just did it a lot better. And Dead Space told its story in about half the time that it took this game to reach its conclusion. So, unless you're a big fan of the Alien franchise itself, and when I say Alien franchise, specifically I'm talking about the original Alien movie, not even the other ones, just the original, the first one. Unless you're a huge fan of that film and you're heavily invested into the lore of that movie and the world and everything, you're not really going to give a shit about the story in this game. Dead Space pretty much tells its own version of what this game is narratively, and it does a much better job by comparison. I look at a game like this and it's really a shame, because when I got to mission 14, that's literally the best mission in the game. Because essentially you're thrown into a nest in the ship's reactor core that Ripley's trying to blow up to take out the aliens. And it feels like it was ripped right out of the movies. It feels like you're actually on a Ridley Scott set in that level, and that's easily the strongest part of the entire game. And there's a lot of nods to the movie and whatnot, but you have to suffer through a lot of repetitive, stressful, annoying gameplay in order to get to that, because it takes place so late in the game, and most players never even got to see that level, and it's a shame. It's a huge wasted opportunity. I think ultimately the team at Creative Assembly, they had good intentions to try and create a game that was faithful to the Alien franchise, but they didn't make a game ultimately that is enjoyable for the vast majority of audiences that are out there. Outside a very small hardcore audience who cares about the Alien franchise and cares about the characters, and knows who the characters are and is just engrossed in that world, no one else cared enough clearly to stick with this game for an extended period of time. And I don't blame anyone for quitting this game early on, because it is a very annoying game to play. It is a very stressful game to play throughout its runtime. And there are certain things that I mentioned earlier that should have and could have been developed a lot better than what they were. Ultimately, I think with Alien Isolation, what they should have done, they should have made a Resident Evil type game where you actually can fight back against the xenomorph, included multiple aliens or whatever. And they could have retained the concept, but it would have just been more of a straight survival horror game instead of basically a hide and seek game, which is what this game is. They should have turned it more into a zombie shooting gallery type game, which is what Resident Evil is. And I think this game would have worked a lot better and it would have been a lot more successful and even potentially led to a sequel had they done that. Basically, this game should have been what Resident Evil 7 is, but it has more in common with Outlast than it does Resident Evil. And even the concept of the xenomorph being this unkillable creature that you have to hide from, like I said, there's not much about that concept that they do that evolves throughout the course of the game, which is why it becomes stale and frustrating once you get to the later levels and you realize that the game is just doing the same thing it was doing at the beginning of the game, late in the game. The concept with the alien in this game was actually done a lot better with the Resident Evil 2 remake. If you play the Resident Evil 2 remake, Tyrant is this NPC that you can't kill that actively is a character in the environment that's unscripted and will search the environment for the player. And the brilliance of Tyrant in that game is that you could be in a separate room and still hear him. You can hear him walking around, looking around, searching. And Tyrant will go from room to room to room until he finds you. And once he finds you, you basically got to run away or find a way to evade him or stun him with a lot of gunfire. But the Resident Evil 2 remake never punishes the player just because they're seen by Tyrant. Whereas in Alien Isolation, getting spotted by the xenomorph means game over. And what that does is it trivializes the gameplay and turns the game into this nonsensical repetitive mess of hide and seek every time the damn thing comes on screen. And it just makes the game frustrating. There are ways that they could have made this game a lot better than what it turned out to be. The high review scores and the cult following this game has is mainly due to the atmosphere and the sound design, which is some of the best that I've ever seen in any video game I've ever played. But atmosphere and sound design is not what makes video games good. What makes video games good is gameplay. And if you have a game that can't evolve its gameplay loop, that just runs on too long and wears out its welcome long before the credits start rolling, then essentially what you're left with is just a mediocre game that failed to live up to expectations. And anyone who says different is just a mindless shill who would accept anything that's put in front of them, which is the vast majority of gamers today. So, unfortunately, that's where I arrived with Alien Isolation. Again, I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a good game. But there's just too much mediocrity with the gameplay, and there's not enough new elements that are introduced to accommodate for the lengthy runtime, which was the main point made in IGN and GameSpot's review of this game, and they are 100% correct, both Kevin Van Ord and Ryan McCaffrey. So I understand that this game has a cult following, and I get that there are people out there that genuinely feel that this game should have been praised the hell and back, given multiple Game of the Year award nominations and some wins. But as I already stated, it's pretty clear and obvious why this game didn't succeed. It's pretty clear why it flopped and Sega considered it to be a failure sales-wise. And everything that I stated is wrong with this game could have easily have been fixed, but I think the development team thought they truly had something special on their hands, and by the end of the development cycle, I guess they thought, this is the game that we wanted to make, and basically the outcome is that the game flopped. And because it flopped, there will never be a follow-up to this game. There will never be a sequel that's made for Alien Isolation. Like I said, it's a huge missed opportunity. And when it comes to survival horror, Resident Evil is as good as it gets. As far as Alien games go, or video games based off of the Alien franchise, after the failure that was Aliens Colonial Marines and this game, Alien Isolation, I don't think Sega is going to be too persistent to make any more games based off of this series when they've essentially had two major flops that didn't recoup their budget, let alone make any money beyond that. Basically, it comes down to another case of the movies are better. No video game is going to match the actual movies, and that's just the simple fact. Licensed video games really aren't a thing anymore for a reason. It's because they typically tend to fail. So unless your video game is attached to a major franchise like Batman or Star Wars or something like that, making a video game based off of a popular license, especially if it's based off of like a film franchise, it just seems like financial suicide in this day and age with the gaming industry. And Alien Isolation is just another example of that.